Well, here we are, week 40, day 4, and we continue in our reading from the Gospels. Now, Matthew and Luke are the only two who share stories about Jesus' birth, and in the case of Luke, early childhood. And so these are the two that we start with. Today, we're going to be reading Matthew 2 as well as Luke chapter 2, verses 39 through 52. Here, what we see is in Matthew, he demonstrates that God has promised the coming of a king, someone as a follower in the line of David, to rule over Israel once more. But it's not going to be just any kind of king. Remember, if we looked at the kings of Israel and the kings of Judah, we found that there were a lot more bad kings than good kings. And here, as Matthew continues his story and he tells us about the wise men who came, we find in that aspect of it the contrast between the great king that God has promised, that is being fulfilled in the birth of Jesus, versus the paranoid puppet king who was the ruler Herod. Herod, of course, was not a Jew, even though he was named king of the Jews and he took on the title king for himself. He was actually an Idumean. That's a descendant of Esau. Remember the story of Jacob and Esau? He is the older brother who gave up his birthright. It's his descendant whom Herod is. And as a result, Herod knows that his position is precarious, first in the eyes of the Jews who recognize that he's not a Jew, but second, by the overlords of the Roman Empire that have put him into power. His paranoia is such that when the wise men come following the star that points to someone whose work is bigger than the Roman Empire, Herod lives in fear and causes great disturbance by trying to eliminate the threat that he perceives to his own power. Now, in contrast, Luke isn't worried about the politics, if you will, of the region. Rather, he looks to an event, one of the only recorded event from Jesus' youth. For him, it's not about the people who are in power, but the knowledge of God coming to be human, in human flesh and blood, and his awareness already at age 12 as being the Son of God. And what does that mean? What does it mean to be the Son of God, but living within the confines of human flesh and blood and the timeline of childhood to adulthood? Sometimes we know what we are called to long before we actually have the opportunity to fulfill that calling. What is that like, the waiting period? Perhaps it is like the season of Advent, where we're waiting for, in this case, the coming of Christmas and the birth of Jesus. Maybe we're waiting for the gifts that'll appear under our own trees, or waiting for those whom we love to open the gifts that we've so thoughtfully prepared for them. We do not like waiting, and yet, even here, Jesus demonstrates to us how it is that we can wait for the perfect time, the perfect moment that God has called and planned us to be in.